Welcome to the Small Biz Optimization podcast. And thank you again for joining me on the podcast today. We've been working together going on 3 months, and it has been a good experience for me because I'm learning a lot from you guys. This is a very, very hot topic within our country, within our corporate world. Tell me about how you two came together in reference to wanting to get involved in this.
Absolutely. So Jeff and I have known each other for a long time. We actually met each other through our work in education. And we really had respect for what the other was doing. And we came together to build a program called the Exponential Learning Academy back then, where we would get a group of students who we were helping to learn more about themselves, to increase transfer and success rates around an African American and Black experience. And so we came together teaching those students and found out that a lot of our values, beliefs, vision for the needs in the world were aligned. And through that, sort of came together and said, we should do this, right? We should work together and try and help create more opportunity for the world when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging together. So that's sort of my take on it. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I liked Janelle from the moment I met her. You said our interests were aligned. We got on well, is how I would say it too, right? We just kind of were not two peas in a pod, but we enjoyed each other's company, and then when we started getting to work together, what a gift that was, because it's always such a pleasure to get to work with people that you enjoy. And that actually ties into a lot of the work that we do, right? The foundation of the work that we do is about helping people have more positive experiences in their work environments. And when you do have that positive experience, I think it's more rich, your work, you enjoy it more, you're more likely to be productive, more likely to be creative, all that stuff. And it's just more fun. And so we had a lot of fun working together back in those days in the 2000s, many moons ago. And it was one of those things we just kept saying, like, we should start a business or something. And then right before the pandemic, actually, right before COVID, 2019, we really started having more conversations about that.
Yeah, and what better time to get involved in this as a business, because there was so much happening within our country during that time. We were coming out of that time. It was COVID. We had George Floyd. We had all kind of things happening, and in reference to this issue in this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So tell me about, like, where do you guys see the challenges? Where are you guys trying to insert yourselves from a business and corporate standpoint? Because I've talked to a lot of my corporate friends in reference to this issue, and these are bigger corporations. These are the Fortune 100. A couple of my friends who work in those organizations, but they range from corporate Fortune 100 to 1,000 companies and stuff. And you have some companies that when these issues were happening, they were doing a lot of engagement and a lot of things within this issue. But as it kind of went away, the narratives also changed within those organizations. So tell me about, like, what you guys are doing on the front end. We're trying to get in and talk to these organizations, as well as maybe some of the back end stuff of what needs to be explained from a value perspective of what you guys are doing.
You want me to take that?
Well, you go ahead. I'll jump on.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with what you were saying, Jamar, was just, I think it is true that social pressure, right? Like cultural pressure on organizations matters. People demanding things from organizations matters. And a large social justice movement after the execution and murder of George Floyd did catalyze a lot of organizations. And I kind of put them into like two buckets. There's like the bucket of organizations, which is most of people we worked with, who were saying we really should do something around racial equity. We really should do something that's about building more belonging. We have kind of been doing this, and now there's this push, this demand. And so there's organizations that were already leaning there, had already started the work, were interested in the work, and this horrible event, right, and the movement around it catalyzed them to start. And then the other bucket were organizations who hadn't and really weren't interested in it and felt compelled to do so for fear of being outed, basically, in the community as not caring or not being mindful of the importance of the topic. But what we've found basically is that every organization that we've worked with likes the work. I mean, it's not always easy, it's not always fun, but it is exciting because it's about building an environment that basically everyone wants to work in. Like, there's who doesn't want to feel valued, who doesn't want to feel their humanity is seen, who doesn't want to, be respected. Like, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. And I guess I would just add, who belongs has always been a political conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who is allowed to belong is always a political conversation. But what we have found is that when we can work with an organization to build belonging across that entire team, then we see they have increased creativity on the things that they can do. Their productivity goes up. People want to stay there longer. They're happier employees when they're there, right? They get to share the work, so their capacity increases. Like all of those things, and that has never been a political conversation. And so, as when we're talking about DEI, and as we say EDIB, like when we're talking about that, the nation has the world has kind of conflated that to mean things that it's not. But in our work and the organizations that we work with, what Jeff is talking about, that excitement that they have is really tied to what they're seeing as a result. More invested employees, right? People who want to grow up in that organization, people who want to contribute to the work that's being done, people who want to tell the story of the work that's happening. And that is something that across the board, we know organizations want. And so, EDI gets conflated with all of these other things from, quite frankly, folks who don't know what it actually is. Right. So that happens. And that's not the work, right? The things that are out there in the political arena is really not the work. But for those people who are equity practitioners, they are familiar with this work and they've seen these kind of results. And so for us, we don't really get tied up into that political arena, because what is being touted and shared is actually inaccurate, quite frankly, very inaccurate to the work that actually needs to be done.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just real quick, Jamar, I think it's less and less politicized in a sense, because when Janelle's saying like it increases productivity, it increases creativity, it increases retention. Let's be clear. That increases your bottom line, right? As an organization, like that is about making more money, which is something culturally that we are very familiar with in the US, right? That motivator, right? That driver. And I think we're getting better and better, not just like we at Revolve, but I think that culturally we're starting to get better at recognizing the very tangible, measurable benefits of investing in this work on the human side, right? Like it's just better for us as humans, but also on the making money side, which is, one of the primary drivers for most organizations, for most companies.
It's a direct correlation from diversity to, profitability and,
Absolutely.
those kind of type of margins and stuff. And I definitely was going to get into that as well. I had some questions around that, but, I just want to add this to you guys' conversation and what you're saying, because when we first initially got together and I was going over your brief and everything and looking at that and looking into your business industry and, whatnot, when I started making those calls, like I was telling you, and what was funny is I've come to learn, like, this is exactly like, and again, I'm not trying to politicize this or anything, but like Obamacare and the real name of our healthcare, or Obamacare, which is the American Health
the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, Affordable Care Act. Yeah. And it's like, what people don't understand is that Obama stole that from Mitt Romney. He took that plan, and I'm sure they made some changes to it, but overall, it's Mitt Romney's plan, a Republican plan. And now, like 83% of the Americans, people in our country who are on that, do not want it to go away. But then you have some people who vehemently opposes it when it's called Obamacare.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to make issue with the presidents and all of this kind of thing, but what I'm trying to like drill down to is that with this issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, with these companies, they're looking at it like, oh man, this is like an affirmative action, and we have to do this, and we have to have these conversations with these people, and I don't want to do this. And that was kind of like the vibe I was getting from some of the executives. But at the end of the day, it's like, No, you really want to talk about this because this is your company superpower.
That's right.
That diversity, you know, the equity and the inclusion, that is your superpower. And so I'm glad that you guys made reference and drew that direct correlation so people can understand, and managers, CEOs, directors who in these big corporations and these companies can understand that that is your measurement, or that thing that's going to get you to that profitability and to that operational standpoint that your company wants to be at. And it's like I'm almost for certain that if we went out and did the research, and I'm sure you guys have, you can show companies who have these initiatives within their organizations how they're probably outperforming these other companies who don't. Would that be a correct assumption?
Absolutely. There's all kinds of research out there. Deloitte, for example, is a well-known organization that has that research out there. SHRM is another one, right? So not only that, Jamar, there's also a lot of evidence that says when you're looking at millennials in particular, they don't want to work
Mm,
for organizations who have not centered belonging, diversity, equity, and inclusion in that workplace. So, one of the things that we like to point out to organizations is as you are hiring candidates and you're going through those interviews, those candidates are also interviewing that organization and they're making
right.
some decisions, right? What do you value? How is that showing up? Are you paying lip service, or are you actually about the things that you say you're about? Are you making sure that you are centering equity, diversity, and inclusion? Do you have a diverse workspace, or am I going to come into a space where it's only me? Because guess what, if that's happening, I'm not staying. I'm using this as a stepping stone for my next opportunity. And so
Right.
yeah, there's organizations that are like, yeah, we don't want to get into that, that's like affirmative action, and they don't have to. But what they will find, and what the research tells us, is that other organizations will soon surpass them because they have tapped into the power of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, it's not that you can't be productive as a business without any belonging in your organization. Like
No,
obviously we know that is possible. You can be productive. You just aren't going to be as productive, and in an economy that is competitive, that is a disadvantage, right? You are at a distinct disadvantage. And you were asking about connections. The report out of Oxford and the Wellbeing Research Center, right? So this is Jean-Emmanuel Deneuve, and the report is called Workplace Well-Being and Firm Performance, right? So this was this massive study where they used over 150,000 people from Indeed, right? Indeed.com, and their data about their experiences at their company, because they have a happiness measure that they had all these people fill out. And they literally did a comparison, and they were like, if you took companies from the S&P 500 and you invested in the top 20 of those, or you invested in the top 20 organizations that had a higher happiness score. And again, happiness, the number one variable that affected happiness was belonging, right? So, and if you had invested in those companies, you would have made more money as an investor. You'd got a better ROI, a better return on your investment if you had invested in the companies that had the better happiness index, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, that's like not just shocking, but that's like, yeah, that actually, when I
That's it.
remember when I, yeah, like I heard that and then I read it and I was like, that makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. And I think that we are in a space where more and more organizations are going to start realizing that that gives them a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And it's
Yeah.
also something that feels good and is more fun, right? It's like you get both.
Right,
So it's a win-win.
right.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, Jeff, because you know there's organizations out there and people within these organizations, where they be in the executive corner offices or at the manager director level, they feel like, oh, this, DEI stuff is foo-foo talk, right? But I'm
Hmm.
glad you said what you just said, because I worked in HR for almost 20 years, before I started this business. And one of the things I can tell you, I worked in compensation, and we, on our exit interviews, we almost never had people saying they were leaving because of the money.
Hmm.
There were
Yep.
instances where someone got an opportunity where it was a promotion level type situation, but for the majority of the cases, it was never about the money. It was about what you just said, which was belonging, ownership, within their role, and recognition. Those were
Hmm.
probably the top three that we were always seeing and stuff. So, for any of you executives out there, CEOs, directors, managers, that are sitting back saying, "Well, we're doing fine," we're making a lot of money and all of this kind of stuff. Um, but are you the market leader? And I can almost guarantee you, the market leader within your industry, within your niche, they're that way and they're in that position because they're leveraging the diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's talk about, we're looking to have conversations with these executives, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Okay, so I'm gonna be that executive that I understand, I see what you're saying about all of these issues, but how do I execute that? How do I get these initiatives into our organization? How do I present it in a way where people are going to see it as of value to them?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that we've learned in working with organizations across the nation is if it's not authentic at the top, people can read it right away.
Mm,
If it's not something that you are fully committed to, if it looks like it's just a compliance thing where I'm going to do it to check the box and then say that I did, your team members will read it right away, and that signals
yeah,
to them all those things that we were just talking about. So I think that would be my number one, is to come and commit. And we say change takes courage, and it does, because we know that that sometimes means that I need to deprioritize something. I need to take something that was really important and say, you know what, that's not essential right now. I need to really start to commit to this thing. So number one is about that idea of commitment. But the other, I would say, is it doesn't have to be that hard. I know for us, we know that people have lots of competing priorities. There's all these things that they need to get done. And we know that most people in most organizations are not equity practitioners, right?
hmm
Equity is not one of those things where you can go to 20 hours of training and then all of a sudden you're an expert. Like, it's not
right,
that. Just like you became an expert in HR after 70 years, right? Like, it
right,
takes a long time to become an expert in equity. So nobody is expecting for you to do that overnight either. But one of the things that we have done at Revolve to sort of help along and build capacity in your organization is come up with these e-learning modules. And so if you
mm,
want to get started with your hiring practices. We have something called BearOp, which is a e-learning module that you plug it in and it takes you through that training and helps you to look at how can I review my hiring practices and then make them more equitable, where we can create spaces of belonging. Or we have another one that's on how we onboard and train folks who are already there and our new employees, and learning this sort of baseline of understanding when it comes to equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So some of those things, it doesn't have to be that hard, but I would say that it does take courage,
mm,
just having the courage to say, you know what, I'm committing to this. It is essential for my organization, and therefore, this is what we're doing. When you have that authentic commitment, then your team members understand, tying it to your mission, seeing how that's important inside of your mission of your organization and your strategic values, making sure that it's tied into all of those things, help the team members across the organization understand that this is the direction we're going, this is why we're going there, and it cascades meaning across that organization so people know what to do.
that's
Yeah,
excellent,
I
and I agree with that
yeah.
100%. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think a couple other things I would think of are, we spoke about this in one of our podcasts, the Belonging Chronicles. We were talking about, for leaders, time. And Janelle, you were mentioning this, right? That the time is a limited resource. It is not a commodity, right? I think I always get this right,
That's
right,
right.
Janelle. It's not a commodity. You can't buy more of it. It is a limited resource, and I think that's probably the thing that most leaders are struggling with it initially. It's the initial kind of like, well, we have so much going on, we don't have time to do this, and it's
Right.
like, well, what you spend time on tells everyone what your values are. But it also should align, right, with your values. So if you as an organization are saying we value diversity, then you should spend time on that, because that's how you
Right.
you get different outcomes. That's how things change.
you know it's a part of how you're operating as a company, which is important. And all company, and this is something I tell my clients, and I'm sure business leaders will kind of like second me on this, but you can't improve anything that you're not measuring, i.e. spending time.
That's
committing
right.
to it like you guys are just talking about. So you're absolutely correct with that. So
Yeah, and
you guys,
Jamar, let me,
oh, go ahead.
if I may, I just want to add one thing in too.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
it doesn't, when we say time, the investment of time does not have to be hundreds of hours a month. Like, there are small things you can do, but you have to
right.
dedicate some amount of time to it.
And I'm assuming when organizations leverage you guys as platforms that Janelle was just talking about, they're able to extract reports from there that give them quality information that they can then go and start either creating policy around, creating initiatives around, those kind of things, right?
Yeah. So in our different e-learning, we can give them reports on who's completing, who's not completing, all of those things. But in addition to that, it comes with a supplemental guide that helps them in how can I move this forward? What are the additional things that I can do here? What are the other conversations I can have, with my team to have this carry on beyond the training? How might I be able to use what's in here to change some of the things that our current practices are? So it's not just the 1 hour training, right? There's the other things that will continue to help the organization moving forward.
And you're talking to Jamar, there's other, like most organizations like ours offer services around assessment. And so that's either consulting, where we help an organization do an internal assessment, right? A climate survey in which they're understanding where people are around happiness, belonging, et cetera, and making sure that they're using good measures for that. Sometimes it's us coming in and actually doing that. And that definitely generates from us very detailed reports on what organizations need to do and how they can get there. So some of that comes out of the e-learning, but some of it is also a whole other way you can approach this work, right? If you're like, I have no idea where our organization is, we would definitely say it's a good idea to ask people where your organization is and get some input on that.
Yeah, and you guys, your business, model is set up very similar to mine. So, you know, what we do is we build growth infrastructures for companies, right? For small businesses. And it's easier for us to go in, like you said, do that assessment and come back and say, here's where we're at. Here's how we're going to implement this and our recommendations. And then we go out and execute that. And it's very similar to what you guys do. You go into organizations, leverage your platforms to provide them with assessment information, and then go in and execute it as well. And that's very important
Absolutely.
because with these type of things, like you said earlier, you may not have the personnel that is experienced and knowledgeable in this area. And so instead of trying to go out and do all of these things around that, it's just much easier to bring you guys in, let you do your thing in essence, right? And leverage your expertise in this field. And they get there much faster, I
Yeah,
would assume.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things we found is that it can be scary for folks to have the kind of conversations around belonging. And it's
Hmm.
not that folks aren't capable, it's that it's unfamiliar. Right. And so sometimes it's much easier to have other people who do this stuff all the time to help you in beginning to make that process available. Because when you have an organization where you make it clear that you're open and interested in feedback by others. It's one thing to say, yeah, I'm open to feedback, give it to me. It's another thing to help people to get there and create that
Hmm.
climate so that exists long after we're gone. But it's
Yeah.
not, the things that we say around belonging, they're not always easy for people. Not everybody is like I said, familiar with that
Hmm.
idea of putting themselves out there, right? Like of calling in, right? Of all of
Yeah.
those things that for some of
And
us
I
is
can
real easy
see,
to do.
and Janelle, I can see a lot of big corporations or, small business enterprises who initially will get that wrong because they themselves will try to do it. And
Yeah.
like you said, it comes off very disingenuous, like, oh, now you're a diversity authority because we had a
Yeah.
fight break out in the cafeteria or something happened in news media, what have you. Um, so them saying, "Hey, we want to get in front of this," a company saying, "We want to get in front of this," or "We notice that this is something that we really need to focus on as a company and have our company be a part of this conversation." in a positive way, I think that's very important. That way, companies can be able to bring you guys in as the authorities, as the experts in this field, and it will be just such a better look. I really believe that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and we help in a number of ways. So we can come in and be the people who do that, right? Who can come in and help have the conversation and facilitate the conversation. We've also helped organizations to kind of craft an agenda for those meetings and coach them along in terms of how you approach, how you respond, the way that you phrase things, the way that you don't phrase things that don't go over
right,
well. So we've assisted through the coaching process also. And then we've also sort of been the folks who have come in to kickstart something. And then we slowly sort of remove ourselves from the process. We're not about fostering dependency on our organization at all. We're really
right.
about helping you to develop those tools so you can use them moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, one of our client partners, that's someone we work closely with, said once that the secret sauce at Revolve was our ability to make things applicable. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of when a lot of people hear work around belonging or they hear DEI, I think that a lot of people think what we're going to do is we're going to sit in a circle and we're going to deep dive on everything that's different about all of us, and there's going to be tears and there's going to be confusion, and I'm not saying that sometimes might not be a lovely thing to do, but we are very focused on, as Janelle said, like implementation and sustainability, right? This is about building your capacity as an organization. And so everything we do is centered around how can you implement this? How can you make this applicable? And we do that in a whole variety of different ways. But that's the advantage, right? Of having someone who does this work a lot come in. I mean, having our work with you has been that you do it a lot, so you can come in and give us advice and insight as to how to like market something, for example, and we get to benefit from that insight, right? Because you've applied it before. I can read about it, but putting it into practice is where the rubber meets the road, right? That's the hard
right.
part, and that is where we, I think, thrive as an organization, is that we help organizations get it done and start to see change.
That's a great point, Jeff. And again, in my world, just as well as your world, there's a big shift happening. And I sent an email out about this last week or this weekend talking about this. There's a big shift happening in small business right now, and the business model is changing. No longer are organizations can they afford, because of the competitiveness and everything that's going on within business world and economies these days. No longer can you start a business and try to figure things out, take 5 to 7 years to figure things out. Companies that are scaling like very fast and very quickly, they're going out and building this growth infrastructure with experts that know what they're doing, and they're implementing and bringing them into their business to do that, and they're able to scale quickly. And this is exactly what you guys are saying. It's the same thing. These existing organizations, that if you want to get a quicker return and amp up scaling your business and getting into different markets, or whether it's increasing profit margin, bring in experts that know this part of the business and let them do their thing. So, with that being said, tell me what your dream client looks like.
Ooh, I'm going to think about that one. That's a good
From an
one.
employee standpoint, you know, maybe revenue of the company. What are the type of companies that you guys, like working with, or that you even target?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was gonna say my initial response to that, Jamar, is is a company that is interested in the work, right? Is interested in enhancing their business. So, and I know that sounds silly, right? But I do think in this work, that interest or that openness to investing in something where you're planting seeds, you may not see an immediate outcome. It may take a few months, but that
Right.
you have that vision, you have that desire, that interest. I think that's an ideal company, because that means that you're going to get in there and you're going to do the work. You're self motivated. We don't have to convince you that there's a reason to do it, which we do sometimes. We have to talk to executives and sometimes help them see the business case or understand that, and that's okay. But it's different than an organization that is like, yeah, we really we really would like to do this. We don't know what it means. We don't know how, but we would really like to do this.
So with that being said, you would probably say it like, we are interested in working with companies who see and understand the value in diversity, inequity, and inclusion, but need help on implementing these initiatives within their organization. But
That's
our
why you
good,
do what you do, Jamar.
yeah,
That's a great summary. That's why you do what you
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
thank you. But that's what it is. You know, we're looking,
Mm-hmm.
the dream client that you guys are looking for is a company that sees the value in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but need to get better understanding and expertise, be able to leverage your expertise to implement these policies and initiatives within their organization to make them better,
Yeah.
to help them
Absolutely.
achieve their objectives.
Janelle, is there anything else for
Absolutely.
you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we work with the willing, right? That is number one, right? We don't want to have to spend a lot of time trying to convince people
Yes,
or organizations of the value of this work. We can do
right,
some of that, and that's not where our ideal client is. Our ideal client
yeah,
recognizes the importance of this and is willing to commit to it. And with that being said, also is not looking to just pay someone to make their problems go away, right?
mm,
Pay somebody to take on this and you do that over there so we can keep doing what we're going to be doing. But somebody
right,
instead who recognizes that our commitment to this means that some of the things that we're doing are going to change for
right,
the better, but they're going to change. So that commitment to being able to invest in the work personally, not just pay
right,
somebody else, right? But to personally invest, give time and commitment to that work, I
right.
think
So
is
this
ideal.
not a rubber stamp
That's
type
right.
of deal. Yeah, this has been
No.
a great conversation. I'm glad you guys are able to jump on with me today to do this podcast and stuff. And the thing that I want to say in reference to closing it out, I'll say this, you know, the great thing about our country, what really makes us a superpower globally, in my opinion, is the diversity of our country. And I think the more that our country reflects the diversity that we have, or I shouldn't say the country, but corporations, organizations, our government institutions, education, wherever you see it, sports, entertainment, all of these things that impact our world, our way of life in our country, the more of the diversity that we see in all of these platforms, organizations, and all of that, the better our world, the stronger our country will be. I truly believe that. I truly believe that. So this is why I love you guys' work and what you're doing, because I think it you know, it empowers that initiative for our world to look like this, because we can't be this one-sided type of country where everybody doesn't feel included and doesn't feel a sense of belonging. And so when, you know, I come across individuals like yourselves, it's just you're doing something good for the world,
Mhm.
and you're helping to make it a better place. And so I commend you to what you're doing. You have a great business, and with the things that we're working on, the infrastructures that we're building for you guys, it will be a success. Truly, you two are positive people. You're doing something that's very needed in this world. We just got to get you in front of more people, so they can hear your voice and your story and stuff. So we're definitely committed to that, you know, myself and my team. So again, thank you guys for joining me today on the podcast. And any final thoughts you want to add, either one of you?
Just want to say thank you, Jamar, for this opportunity and having us be on your podcast today. Really, really appreciate you helping to elevate this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say we're collaborators at our core, and so are you. And I dig that about you. And so very grateful for your guidance and for this opportunity.
And for those of you out there in our podcast sphere, I hope you've learned something today about this issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. It's a very, very important topic that's happening right now. So be a part of this. Get involved. Give Revolve Consulting. Visit them at revolveconsulting.com. And get in touch with Jeff and Janelle. They would love to have a conversation with you about what you have going on in your organization, within your company. And I guarantee you, you will get value from them, whether it's a conversation or whether you bring them in. Reach out to these guys so they can help you. All right, everyone, thank you again. We're over and out. We'll see you guys soon. All right, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.